بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم فلقد نوينا التعلم والتعليم وتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وبسنة الرسول صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. الحمد لله. السلام عليكم. الحمد لله. Do we have anyone to keep track of time? 2:47. Okay. SubhanAllah, I need to change my clock. Forgive me, my body clock's way off. That's my excuse at least. 2:46 is a lame excuse. Alhamdulillah. So, the intention, the objective for us gathering this afternoon was to hopefully explore something of our tradition as Muslims. It's something which is often perhaps not fully comprehended, often abused, and often misused, and often misinterpreted. And it's for a greater, for the purposes of and the brevity of time, I'm going to use the word the spiritual tradition. And just to clarify that, what I'm talking about is that which is to do with a certain part of our makeup as human beings. We are part light and we're also part clay. And often in contemporary society, there's only the recognition of the clay. So it's this coarse physicality, it's this kind of heaviness. And when that light component is neglected or not fully nourished, what starts to happen is there becomes an imbalance even in the realms of the clay. Now what we mean by clay is that's the base component, but it also affects our minds, our rationale, the decisions that we make, the choices that we have in our lives. If there isn't an inward harmony, what starts to happen is we make the wrong choices, and we make probably, you could say, like overly zealous decisions which are often hasty. So, as Muslims, the Prophet ﷺ, he taught us this balance. His sunnah is inherently balanced. That's the meaning. Sunnah linguistically means a path. And a path, if it's authentic, should lead you onto a destination, to a goal. You don't just go on a path on a road to nowhere. It's leading to a goal. So understanding that destination, what that means. Then also, if we unpack the term spirituality, what does it mean? It's that which pertains to that reciprocal point, that place within every single one of us, which is able to contain that light and intuit something deeper. Everyone has this. It's not just that not only the Muslims have souls, everyone has a soul. And we need to understand this. So the term in Arabic for soul is ruh. It's a really beautiful word. Ruh. Sounds spiritual. Like there's a lot of onomatopoeia in the Arabic language. So the way you enunciate something is also similar to the sound. So for example, wind in Arabic, one of the words for wind is rih. Rih. Balbala means just like gobbledygook. Balbala. There are many examples of this. There are some wonderful studies of the Quran in terms of its the harmonics of the Quran, like how the actual intonations and elongations of certain words, because it's a recital. It's not just a dry, solidified text. It's a recital. And that's why in the science of tajweed, Tajweed is from the verb jawada, which literally means to beautify your recitation. And what that means is to make it as much like the recitation of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as possible. That's the standard of beauty. So it makes a difference when you elongate or when you don't elongate. You know, if you say wala dhalin, it doesn't have the same resonance upon the soul. So our tradition is one which is holistic. It's one which is appreciative of that component within us. And today it's been called an intensive. Hopefully it's not going to be too intense. And hopefully it's going to be an opportunity to exchange and share and deepen and explore something of this tradition. So the real objective of today is that we have the opportunity to share and deepen and even just acquaint ourselves with something of this component of our religion. Now, as Muslims, the concept of authenticity is really central to our faith. You know, how do we're a tradition of sanad, of unbroken transmission, all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the early people around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would say, were it not for this institution of sanad, which literally means a link, like a chain, then anyone would have said whatever they want to say. And you could say, well, in an egalitarian society, that sounds quite diplomatic, that's nice. Absolutely, but also you're not going to have any Tom, Dick or Ahmed performing open heart surgery on you if you needed that, kind of, God forbid. And the point being is that it requires an element of expertise, of training, of discipline. We're not like within certain realms of other faiths, whereby it's actively trying to keep the public away from learning. You know, we'll keep it in Latin so nobody knows quite what we're doing with them. We don't have that understanding. The Arabic is there for everyone to learn. However, it does take a formal study. It does take an element of, you know, ليسوا سواء. هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون? Allah says in the Quran, are they the same? Those that know and those that do not know. يرفع الله الذين آمنوا والذين أوتوا العلم درجات. Allah raises those who believe and those who He's bestowed knowledge upon in degrees, in levels. So with Allah, there's not really a democracy. Allah does prefer some people over others. However, that's something which is only known by Allah. And the adab, the etiquette in engaging in sacred knowledge is to always be in a place of humility. In the desert valley in which I live in, obviously people's analogies and the linguistics, the linguistic devices which they use are shaped by the environment around them. So for example, if you're in Brisbane, you may have certain like turns of phrase which are contextually appropriate to your environment. You know, like even in Cockney rhyming slang, you know, like a Ruby Murray, that means a curry. You're not going to know that if you're not from the East End of London. It's not going to make any sense. And the same, so in Hadramaut, which is where this great saint and scholar and imam hailed from, is that you're surrounded by mountains. And it's very, it's intense. It's like you're enclosed in this great valley. And they give the analogy in terms of a seeker, somebody who's on a path and a quest to authenticity, to truth, to discovering more about their Creator, more about themselves. They say that the rain doesn't settle on top of the mountains. The rain goes down to the very bottom of the valley. And that's why the irrigation techniques, typically the houses would be on the side of the mountains and then they would farm in the middle of the valley. So the idea of these tall mountains was standing kind of haughtily above everyone. They're arid on top, they're barren, there's nothing can be grown, but the more humble that someone can get, you know, lowly, that's where the water trickles down to. Now, what it doesn't mean is you just go around with an arched back and, you know, saying how useless you are at everything. Humility is a state in the heart. You know, so sometimes we can perceive something as arrogance. It's actually not. It's the essence of humility, because it's humility for the sake of Allah and Allah alone. And that means we don't look down upon people. It also means when truth is articulate to us, we're receptive to it. You know, once a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he used to like nice shoes. So he said he said, Ya Rasulullah, is this kibr? Is this an expression of arrogance? And the Prophet ﷺ negated it. He said, it's not arrogance. Rather, arrogance is tarafu an al-haq wa ihtiqal al-khalq. It's to literally, tarafu, literally from the word rafa, to stand tall in the face of truth, meaning you're not receptive to truth. Like, who are you to say that to me? That's one of the biggest articulations of the ego. It doesn't matter who you are to say that to me. If it's a truth spoken, then my soul should be receptive to it. And that's what's called tarbiyah, spiritual training. So it's to look down at the face of truth and not be receptive to it, and to have to be derogatory towards people, to look down upon people. I think you're better than anyone, so that's arrogance. If someone doesn't find that, go and wear the nice, best, swag that you want, but just keep it real with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is all things to do with the soul, because you can't see these things. You can't see arrogance. True? And someone could say, no, I can tell if someone's arrogant, and that's problematic in our tradition. Maybe there are certain expressions or symptoms which you could see, but we're really interested in dealing with the root, and that's where any authentic spiritual path brings you to that, to articulate, what's this got to do with me? Now, prior to just beginning the text, I really wanted to express something, that it's not about the text. It's not about, our tradition isn't about like, I completed this book and I got ijaza and therefore I've attained something. Authentic sacred knowledge in our tradition is predicated upon transformation. That it's something that, for example, if you're drinking something and you're still thirsty, then it's not performed its purpose, even if you bought whatever you were drinking for a large sum of money. If you're eating something and it's not nourishing you, if it's not healthy, if it's not replenishing you, then it's not doing its job. So sacred knowledge, if it's true, if it's authentic, if it's real, should permeate at the level of the soul to such an extent it moves and activates into a place of transformation. Now, that's our intention, because that's not up to us to do. Only Allah can do that. It's not the role of the teacher, it's not the role of the student. All we can do is expose ourselves. So the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ, it was his practice, when it would rain, that he would expose himself to the rain. He would take his hat off and he would say, "Hada hadith min lahad bi Rabbi." This is like from the fresh creation of Allah. And just that realization of everything coming back from this source, and he was living this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, if we following in those footsteps, what we do is we expose ourselves to those rains, those metaphysical, those figurative rains, and that's why we're all sat here today. We're not sat here, hopefully, because we didn't have anything else to do on a Saturday afternoon. We're sat here to discover and to learn and to, maybe just acquaint ourselves a bit more with this incredible component of our tradition. That's the first thing. The second thing, in terms of, we talked about authenticity, where do we root this? What's the ideological, the genealogy of this book? Where does it go back to? What's its source? And we can say this is from a hadith, where a man came out of the desert, and he was wearing a pure white garb, and he had jet black hair, and he had no traces of travel upon him. Even though travel in Arabia in those times, even in this time, means that you're going to get dirty, because you're on the back of a camel, you're under the sun, there's sandstorms. So this was something which was strange to the people around the Prophet ﷺ, because in a traditional pre-modern culture, you knew the people of your village or your town. There was a real community. We weren't these kind of isolated atoms that haven't yet formed a molecule. We were able to exchange, and this was part of, this is the tradition of humanity from the onset. Now, so he came into this, the gathering, the Sahaba was sent there, Umar narrates the hadith, and he sits next to the Prophet ﷺ, and he places his knees, and he places his knees next, like literally touching the knees of the Prophet ﷺ. And he looks to the Prophet ﷺ, and he says, "Akhbarani ala al-Islam," like, inform me about Islam. Tell me what Islam is about. And the Prophet ﷺ said, it is to believe in the oneness of God, that I am the messenger of God. It's to establish the prayer. It's to pay the charity, the apportioned amount of charity, the zakat. It's to fast in Ramadan, and it's to make the pilgrimage to the sacred house, the Kaaba, for the one that's able to find a way. The man responded by saying, Sadaqta. You've spoken the truth. It's like saying in English, you're correct. You're right. And the Sahaba found this really perplexing. That somebody would just rock up out the middle of the desert in this kind of form and then, ask the Prophet ﷺ a question and then affirm that he'd spoken something of truth. But their adab didn't permit them to go, wait a minute, what's going on here? They were absolutely quiet, and they just listened with courtesy and respect. He then said, أخبرني على الإيمان. Inform me about Iman, which you can translate as faith, the process of faith, what we believe in, basically. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said it's to believe in the oneness of God, it's to believe in His messengers, His prophets, it's to believe in revelation, divinely revealed revelation, it's to believe in angels, angelic beings, unseen entities, realities, but to affirm belief in them, and to believe in the last day, Yawm al-Qiyamah, and to believe that all good and all perceived evil is ultimately sourced in Allah, it's from Allah. Nothing slipped out of the control of Rabbil Alameen. And then he said, Sadaqt, you've spoken the truth. The Sahaba by this point were really kind of, Then he said, inform me about Ihsan. What is Ihsan? We were saying previously that Ihsan comes from the root, is from like Husn, or something which is Hasan, Ha, Sin, Nun. This semantic root, typically, it means something of beauty, or perfection, or proficiency, or excellency. It's this kind of semantic feel. So the word Hasan means beauty. Hussein means the smaller beauty. Because you have Hassan, you have Hussein, who was... When Ali went to the Prophet ﷺ, when Hassan was just born, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I have a baby boy. The Prophet ﷺ was delighted. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, what have you called him? He said, Ya Rasulullah, we want to call him Harb. Harb in Arabic means war. Because the Arabs were warriors. They were all warring. They were just within their makeup. They were great, these great knights of Arabia. And they said, we called him War. And the Prophet laughed. He said, his name is Hassan. His name is Beauty. But if you look at the gentleness, the way the Prophet came to these great desert warriors and just made them so gentle, we can't underestimate the power of the verse in the Quran, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالِ وَهُوَ كَرْهٌ لَكُمْ. Like fighting, like war has been prescribed for you in its particular context. It's not vigilante violence. There is a legislated martial component to our tradition. However, that's always appropriated with very distinct balances and details. وَهُوَ كَرْهٌ لَكُمْ. And it's disliked to you. Now, if you understand the context of the Arabs, pre-Islamic Arabia, war was not disliked to them. They loved war. They loved fighting. They would fight over, somebody looked at them wrong. It sounds like Manchester. You look at someone the wrong way, and all of a sudden, this war breaks out. But that was the environment. But why is it now disliked to them? Because of the training of the Prophet, because of the principles of which he instilled in these polarized people, So, Husn, Ihsan. Ihsan is this process of, you could say, spiritual proficiency or excellency, beauty in the way you practice your faith and your Islam. So there's three components to the deen. We often talk about Islam. This is why I really have problems with this word Islamic. Like, I want to be more Islamic. Like, it makes all you've said, really, if we reflect on it, is you want to improve the look. Kind of like modify the shell. But we have three components to our tradition. We have Islam, which deals with formal practice, approach to devotion, how we pray, how we fast, and this is Islam. We also have Iman. So where is our Iman at? The spiritual tradition is all about yaqeen. It's about building this certainty of faith within the soul. And that is something which you can't test for, you can't categorize. It's just a reality which Allah thrusts in the hearts of somebody that He loves. And then you have ihsan, which is the completely neglected side of our tradition. And when the Prophet ﷺ was asked about this, what is ihsan? What is within this belief, within Islam, what does ihsan mean? What does it mean to be authentically spiritual, to have a spiritual beauty or perfection, And the Prophet ﷺ, the prophetic definition is incredible. He said, هو أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه وإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. It's to devote yourself to your Creator to the point it's as if you see Him. Like, it's so immediate, it's so intimate, it's so intense. That's the pinnacle of our tradition. It's as if you see Him. Now, we're not talking with the eyes, we're talking about with the heart. That you feel His closeness, you feel this, which is a very elated state. It's a very, very high maqam in our understanding. And then he said, وَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. And if you don't see Him, meaning you're not of that caliber, you've not yet achieved that kind of presence, just know that He sees you. That's called muraqabah. The first is known as mushahada, and then you have muraqabah. Muraqabah is a practice to understand that when you're praying, okay, you're being watched. And it's not in the way that you could watch someone else. It's not like you to look at your own prayer. This is Allah, al-Basir, in which there is nothing which is veiled from Him. So He can even see our thoughts, see our feelings, see our hearts, see those things deep within the depths of our souls and deeper. He knows يَعْلَمُ السِّرَّ وَأَخْفَى. He knows the deep sir, this deep essence of the human being, and what's beyond. A depth and a profundity which we can't even begin to imagine, let alone understand. Jalla Jalaluhu. He also hears, and this is a unique hearing. This is a hearing which is comparable to absolutely nothing. This is perfect hearing. He hears everything. He hears everything which has already been, and everything which is yet to be. So when you start to understand that, and when you're praying to Him, or you're seeking that presence, that intimacy, is to understand that He sees you. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. The book that we'll be inshallah taking from today, hopefully it's not going to be a dilution, it's going to have to be somewhat distilled though. So it's going to be like the espresso of the spiritual world, the spiritual tradition. Hopefully what we can do is at least get in some kind of acquaintance to this path. And they call it a path because it's representative of a journey. It's not spirituality in our tradition. It's not like you turn on a switch or you make a magical dua and all of a sudden you become a saint. It doesn't work like that. So we have to understand that this is now something which we're engaging with the intention for transformation. Well, I don't want to transform. I'm quite happy the way I am. Well, let's unpack that further. What do we mean by transformation? To be a better human being. Who doesn't want that? Well, I'm fine with the way I am. Okay, but there's always room for improvement. Alhamdulillah. Even the Prophet ﷺ always asked for, they say that his istighfar, when the Prophet ﷺ would ask for forgiveness, it wasn't because of sin, he was infallible, but they say it was actually to make, ask forgiveness for the previous state, because he was in constant ascension, in constant increase, in constant, refinement. Allah was just, and he still is now, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his experience of Allah. There's no end. وَإِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ مُنْتَهَاهَا. And then to your Lord is its end. And if there's no end to Allah, then there's no end ultimately to the spiritual path. It just goes deeper and more profound and more intense. Now, as we'll see, spirituality in Islam is inherently practical. So one of the things, I remember my mum once said to me, she said, I'm not very spiritual, I'm more of a practical person. I said, they're the most spiritual of people. Because spirituality in our tradition is not to become some kind of hermit and live in some backwater for the rest of your life. It's actually to be in and amongst the society. It's to do with the fulfilling other people's rights and performing one's duties in an exquisite way. This is very important to understand. So we're going through a book now which is translated as Good Manners. It's probably appropriate, as we've spoken about Sanad, to give a brief introduction to the author of the text. Now, he most likely would not have seen himself as an author, but rather as an inheritor of a tradition. So this is a concise, this is actually the text here. It's a distilling, not a dilution, of this methodology, of this practice. So when the Prophet ﷺ informed Jibreel, which turned out to be about ihsan, we've got to understand that wasn't where it ended. He educated and he taught his ummah about this. How do you get into that presence? How do you worship Allah as if you see Him? So it's not just these kind of like slightly abstracted, distant goals. They were made tangible and practical through a methodology. Now, Imam al-Haddad was born and raised in Hadramaut, which is the desert valley which I was speaking about earlier. Who's heard of Hadramaut? Has everyone heard of it? Yeah? There's a few people here. So this is in the southern part of Yemen, on the tip of the Arabian Peninsula. Southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. And it's a place which has hundreds of years of, you could say maybe 1,000 years worth of sacred knowledge, scholarship, authentic spiritual tradition which draws from. And Imam al-Haddad was raised in this environment. So from a very young age, he was somebody that was just inspired. There's some people that are like Imam al-Nawawi. Imam al-Nawawi was an incredible person. As a young boy, he would sit in the side, and people thought there was actually something wrong with him because he was refusing to play with the other children as a young boy. And like his teacher went up to him and he said, "Why don't you play with the other kids?" And he turns to him and he says, "Ma khaliqtu li hadha," because I wasn't created for this. And as a young boy, like this person was there's many things said about Imam Nawawi. He the ruler at the time was a tyrant, and he gathered a number of the scholars together in Damascus, and Imam Nawawi was amongst them. And it was almost just like a formality. He'd get people together and say, like, "So, how am I doing? What do my subjects think of me?" And it's like scholars for dollars. They're all kind of like, "Oh, you're wonderful. You can do any better." And praise to you. And Imam Nawawi was just sat there in silence. And this is the sign of a person of true integrity and like a real scholar, a scholar whose knowledge has permeated his soul or her soul, and now is able to kind of act upon it. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the greatest jihad, the greatest form of resistance is to speak the truth in the face of a tyrannical ruler. And that's obviously with its understanding and its balance. Now, Imam Nawawi was in that position in society, and that was incumbent upon him. But as we saw for the rest of the people, they were all just, waiting where the next check would come in, and they didn't mention to the ruler. So he said, "What about you? You're sat there in silence." And he said, "Would you permit me to speak?" And he says, "Of course, I've gathered you here to." So you speak. So he gets up and he admonishes the ruler. And this was the way of sincere scholars, but with etiquette and with manners. And he said, "What you're doing here is haram, and what you're doing here, this is abusive, and what you're doing here, this is tyrannical, and this is." And then he just can't believe that he had the courage to say this. And he had to kind of lose his face in front of everyone. And he said, "Just take him off the diwan, take him off the payroll." So like, okay, he's not on the payroll. He said, "Well, take him out of these, he doesn't own anything." They say all that Imam Nawawi owned was his headgear and a robe. Even his books he borrowed, and he gave them back towards the end of his life. Complete zuhad. So he was another inheritor of this tradition. There are many inheritors from east to west. This is not something which is cultish. So when we talk about a spiritual path, we're not talking about a cult. We're talking about a broad, tradition which spanned the ummah from east to west. You'd find it in Andalusia, in southern Spain. You'd find it in Morocco. Much of the links of this tradition from Imam al-Haddad, they go back to Morocco, and they go through Egypt, through Tunisia, to Algeria, to Libya, And then you have the Hijaz, you also have even the Caucasus. And you would have expressions of this preservation throughout the Muslim world. In Nusantara, you'd have it, so Indonesia, Java. You'd have it all the way through into southern Thailand. You'd have it in copious amounts in China. China has an ancient, or a very old presence of indigenous Muslims. وهكذا, even in the Philippines. And what Imam al-Haddad had was, he was really bequeathed this great amount of this inheritance, and he was able to renew and articulate this tradition in a way which was meaningful for the people. Now, one of the things that's important, because he lived over 360 years ago, why is that relevant to us today? It's because these people, they only speak in terms of that which is absolutely relevant and that which resonates at the level of the soul. So it's not about particularities or details, but he's speaking to the soul. And we, as human beings, we're the same souls as we were before. That's why we can, Rumi talks about being careful of the inner Pharaoh within you. Allah didn't talk about the Fir'aun in the Quran just to, oh yeah, that guy back in Egypt way back when. It's about, if you have this tendency, which we all do, pharaonic tendencies, and these great archetypes in the Quran, And they say like a man will be raised amongst the tyrants on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And when he said like, why? I wasn't given any dominion. And he said, no, but you were a tyrant in your home. So it's not, it's just one person was given this huge amount of responsibility. Somebody's responsibility was different, but the way things, the fruits are the same. So Imam al-Haddad was similar to Imam al-Nawawi. His grandmother used to take care of him, and she would come and find him sat not playing with the kids as a young boy, and she would get worried about him. So what he used to do is, when he would hear her coming down the steps, he would start to pretend and start to play with the other children. So what they say, what happened is, at the beginning she was taking care of him, and after a while it was actually him who was taking care of her, like making sure that her heart was, in tune and taken care of. Now, he was a profound scholar of what's known as the inward and the outward sciences, the sciences of the heart, the sciences of also jurisprudence and all the rest of it. And this is a sign of the authenticity of his teachings. And he was given the ability to articulate really profound wisdoms in a very concise and palatable way. And that's what we're engaging with today. So this book in Arabic is known as Adab Suluk al-Murid. Adab Suluk al-Murid. Adab is the plural of adab. What does adab mean? Does anyone know what adab means? Respect. Okay. Manners. Okay. Good manners. Sorry? Etiquette. Okay. All correct. Any more? Yeah, adab definitely is related to consideration. Anything else? Would we say that this was an important part of being a Muslim? To have adab. Yeah. Why?
Responding appropriately to the situation.
Okay. Nice. I like that. Because adab, the thing is with etiquette, and I've said this before, like often etiquette, I don't know here, but in an English society, it's almost archaic. It's kind of like what fork to use for the cheese or the dessert at the, like kind of like an Edwardian Britain. Etiquette, it's a wonderful thing to have good etiquette. You won't see most youth saying that today. It's meaningless. So it's also to do with a refined, like a sacred etiquette. It's that which pertains to something unseen. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he taught us to have adab even when we're alone. So it's not just a linear kind of trajectory. It's to do with the celestial. It's to do with connecting our hearts to something deeper and more profound and heavenly. Even when we're alone, it's this kind of. And adab can mean doing the right thing or the most appropriate thing at the right time, the right place, with the right person, in the right way. So it's nuanced inherently. is nuanced. Adab is nuanced. I like the translation sacred courtesy, because I think that's the closest thing, that kind of, because it's sacred, meaning it's something which is not just about, having good manners. That's why the title of this book, I think it's interesting, but I think that, adab is really to do with the sacred courtesy, to do with appropriateness, to do with nuance. And then you have saluk. Does anyone know what saluk means? I'm going to make you guys do some of the work, and then I can at least. How you treat someone, absolutely. So behavioral kind of, has a behavioral component to it. Saluk. Does anyone know what it means linguistically, by which I mean in terms of the language? Like sometimes words take on a technical vibe, like you call it nomenclature. It has a meaning within the tradition, but does anyone know what it means? Because Arabic is all derived from root words. That's why they say Islam means peace. Strictly speaking, it doesn't. It's actually far more beautiful and nuanced. It's actually far more refined than just meaning peace. But you have the root words of Islam, Sin, Lam, Mim, the root letters rather. Where you get the word Salam, you also have Istislam. There are many words. So the root word of Saluk is Sin, Lam, Kaf. Salaka, Yasluku. So the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, "Man salaka tariqan yaltamisu fihi ilm, salakahu Allah tariqan ila al-jannah." The one that salaka, from this word saluk, it means to embark, or to go on a path, to travel, to journey. Man salaka tariqan, the one that travels upon a path, yaltamisu fihi ilm. He doesn't say to acquire knowledge. Yaltamisu means almost like you constantly find, where is this knowledge? The wisdom is a lost property of the believer. Wherever they find it, they pick it up. So you're constantly receptive, and that's why authentic scholarship in our tradition, it's from the cradle to the grave. It's not this idea of I've done my studies now I'm a teacher. I mean, the teachers in our tradition are the ones that are still acquiring the most. And their teaching is really just a form of augmenting that knowledge and deepening that knowledge. It takes on a different form, but in many ways they're still taking this, they're receiving from Allah and receiving from their teachers. So the ones that travels upon a path, seeking out knowledge, salakahullah, Allah causes him or facilitates a path for this person to paradise. So we're all sat now in a gathering of sacred knowledge. We've gathered together with the intention of seeking sacred knowledge, of maybe learning more about Allah, learning more about His Prophet ﷺ, learning about ourselves, which is an inherent part of this path. And the result of it, Allah rewards that, and Allah sees that as something of absolute value. And that's why the reward is that paradisial reality in the next life. So salaka means to travel. So saluk, it's much as our sister mentioned, it's to do with, it's like a behavioral path. So it's a journey from coarse, harsh, unkempt, display of one's, just existing, to having manners which are exquisite and subtle and nuanced and beautiful and appropriate, to have prophetic behavior. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was only sent for this completion of exquisite human qualities, human character. If you look at his way, it wasn't anything that went before me, let's just efface it. No, the Prophet ﷺ understood that in all cultures and in all people there are inherent beautiful traits, But he came to complete this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So saluk is really a journey, and it's a motion into this reality. That everything that we do, how do we transform it in the spiritual alchemy from spiritual lead to spiritual gold? How do we become people of purpose and meaning, as opposed to just living out our days in pure trivia without any real kind of purpose? And that's the path of suluk, and that's one of the words in the Arabic language for spirituality. So it literally means it's something which is active. It's your movement. There's a movement, and often it's an inward movement because it's a movement into presence with Allah. It's a movement into being a bit more aware of oneself and what your thought process is, your behavior. Because that's a very profound thing. We often underestimate how profound this is. Just the apprehension of, am I doing the right thing? That's actually a stage of refinement of the soul. Adab, Suluk, and Murid. Murid, literally, who can give me a translation for Murid?
Disciple?
Pardon me? Disciple, yeah, it's a good translation. What does that mean? I mean, if you said that to me before I became Muslim, it would sound like Jesus' disciples. Student. Pardon me, I didn't hear. To follow, okay. Okay, yeah, has that connotation. Does anyone know what it means linguistically? Isn't it? So, pardon me? To acquire. Acquire. So, yeah, so it comes from the word irada. Irada. Irada is a will or a desire, a want. So it's somebody who's actively seeking something. The murid is the one that wants something. Hal turid hada? Do you want this? That's how you say that in Arabic. Ana urid. That's one of the first things you learn, just to satisfy the ego. Ana urid hada. Ana urid ma. I want some water. Uridu. So the one that wants is the murid. He's in the state of wanting something. Yeah. Now, what does the person want? You have to want something, surely. You just kind of want stuff. What's this a murid of? Because it's very important to this book. The person is, you could say, there are a murid, or they're desirous of acquainting themselves with their akhirah, with the reality of what does all this mean. They're a murid of knowing how to have more applied, practical, more applied and practical existence, to their daily lives. How do I make this all more, meaningful? They're perhaps a murid of sacred knowledge. They're a murid of learning more about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All these things there's an active, intentional state in the heart. Now, ultimately, all of this comes under a grand umbrella, and you could say the person is a murid of Allah. They're desirous of their Creator, because you don't want the akhirah for akhirah's sake. The next life, why? Why? What's the reason for doing that? Oh, because it's a good thing to do. That's when it becomes problematic. It's only Islamic. I want to be more Islamic. Why? If it's for the sake of Allah, then that's something now that's more meaningful, more real. Now the murid, in reality, is the murad. The murad is the one that's being sought. And this is now pertains to a very important, you could say, a credo, a spiritual principle, that if you have the slightest inclination that you want to learn more about and re-engage more with your faith, to learn more about your own self, to have more of a heightened awareness, to discover maybe more about who Allah is, that ultimately that's not from you. That's from Allah. And that's Allah pulling a person in. That's part of that activation. So in reality, this is only figurative that you're the murid. In reality, you're the murad. You are the one which is being sought. You're the one who is desired. And who's the murid? Allah. Allah's the one that's bringing. It's narrated to Rumi. It's the meaning of the saying, what you seek is seeking you. What you seek is seeking you. This is so amazing. Kind of like the consciousness starts at, wow, so I'm here. Allah's brought me here. Absolutely. Can everybody hear me now? How? How can you hear me? Because Allah calls you to hear. And if Allah took away your hearing for one moment, you wouldn't be able to hear anything. Can everybody see me now? How? Because Allah is constantly creating your ability to see and comprehend and understand and internalize. It's all about Allah, Jalla Jalaluhu. So how do we piece all this together? We've broken it up. Adab Saluk al-Murid. It's the spiritual or the sacred courtesies upon the path of the one who wants Allah. The one that is desirous of learning more about their Creator. And when it's put like that, who couldn't want to be in on that? I'm not really interested in that. Because it has everything to do with you. This is why the spiritual path is really to do with you. But it doesn't end there. That's just the beginning. And certain expressions of spirituality within different religions, often people that have dabbled in them and then come to Islam, they'll talk about the thing that it wasn't fulfilling them because it was just about this very abstract, cosmic type of, removal, like almost monastic. It's kind of a spiritual person. It's just like you have the heightened consciousness. In Islam, it's very, it's purposeful. Like, what's the point in being a purified person? It's not just about being a nice bloke, a nice guy or a nice girl. Why? It's so that your heart can become so supple and receptive to recognition of the one that created you, which creates love. Because there's a knowledge which we can learn about Allah within the realms of, you have Islam, Iman and Ihsan. Iman is Aqidah, it's actually quite straightforward. We believe that God is one. But how do you experience that God is one? Very different. Like, you're not going to ask any Muslim and they're going to be like, well, maybe 3, maybe 4. You're never going to find that. That's something that all the Muslims believe upon. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Allah is one. But there's one thing saying that and then experiencing that. And that's something which, the Iman is within the realm of the mind, it's rational, it's intellectual. But Ihsan really unlocks the heart and the soul and beyond. So this is the title. What time are we on now? 3:33. And what time are we due to finish? Pardon me? 4:30. How about we take like a brief break? If anyone has any questions, maybe in the next 5-10 minutes, and we have a brief break, and then we can go into the book. Yeah. We've only just skimmed through the title. Yeah. One of my teachers, they spent an entire month on the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It just shows how profound and beautiful our tradition is. Yeah. La ilaha illallah. But here's the thing, we're here, and it's not the book that's going to change us, it's not me that's going to change anyone, it's not you, it's all Allah. And as long as we have our hearts in that place, then there'll be changes. That's one of the beautiful things about this tradition, is it's so potent. You can't take a step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala other than it's reciprocated as a response. Alhamdulillah. Adab Saluk al-Murid. May Allah allow us, help us, acquaint us with adab and true adab, what it means from the inside out, and show us the path and its coordinates, and help us, take us by the hand to navigate this path into presence, into authenticity, into keeping it real with ourselves and everyone else, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and help us, because we're all people, we're all murid. That's what Imam al-Haddad says, and we'll get to this. We all want something. Because the human being, you're not just this kind of stagnant entity, like a frog. A frog doesn't really have irada. I don't know why a frog came to mind, it's so random. Kangaroo, we've got to keep it someone kind of, alhamdulillah. If they don't have this, that's part of the nuance of the human being. And that's to do with the soul. The soul is created to want certain things. That's why even with someone that, as I said, if you're not Muslim, you still have a soul, so you still experience love at some level, or kindness, or pain, and that really at the level of the soul. They say, in English, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. What a load of absolute garbage. But that's just so untrue. Like if someone gives you a slight, I mean, I'm not saying do this, but like if someone gives you, like, you can get over it, but if someone says something and it's hurtful, why? Because it scars the soul. It wounds something here, and sometimes, it's how wars begin. It's not from sticks and stones. It's from words, or like, because words have an implication in our tradition. That's why the shahada is so important, because this testification, this bringing out of this, what was internalized into, testimony of this reality. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. So we're all seeking something. We're all desirous of something. And what Imam al-Haddad is teaching us as an inheritor of the prophetic tradition, he's saying, look, seek something of meaning. Be people of profundity. Don't be meaningless people. Be deep people. And be people who are transformed and conduits of transformation for others. Serve humanity. Be a person of benefit. Don't live life wasting your breath away because we only have a short amount of time, and it's the Prophet ﷺ taught us to do this in a way which was purposeful. So, may Allah make us, place in our hearts this ability to apprehend truth and authenticity and to desire it, inshallah. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم الحمد لله رب العالمين. Does anyone have any questions? You don't have to. People are so shy here. It's kind of nice. Although I'm just getting slightly bored by the sound of my own monologue. I'm used to, Manchester typically people are a bit more interactive. You just want them to shut up after a period of time. It's quite a nice respite from that. It doesn't have to be a question, it could be a comment. I'm also here to benefit, inshallah. If I'm not, God help us. Everyone here's from Brisbane? See, I can't even get that out.
I'm not from...
You're not? Thank you, Uncle, I appreciate that. Subhanallah, what part of Africa?
Mozambique.
Really? Oh, beautiful, subhanallah. Oh, really?
But they live here.
Pardon me?
They live here.
Yes, I understand.
And I was living here, I went back
Okay,
to my homeland.
fantastic. Yeah.
We trying to see Mozambique. There was a lot of Sufi tradition.
Yes.
Islam was taken by the Sufi.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the last 50 years, or more than even 70 years, there's been a lot of movement against Sufi.
Yeah.
The tankas and all this been destroyed.
Sure, yeah.
So now,
Petrol dollars definitely have their weight.
Scholars of Sufi back into Mozambique to reinstate this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea that spirituality is some kind of new invention within the tradition, we've just shown how intrinsic it is. So there was no idea that this was something separate or that it was permeated throughout the society. I actually just came from Mombasa. Yeah. I've been to the closest places to Mozambique is probably I've been to the Comoros Islands. Yeah.
I'm born in Mombasa.
Oh, really? Oh, fantastic. I love Mombasa. All of East Africa is incredible. Incredible.
Mozambique was about 70%.
Oh, really? Subhanallah. Interesting.
And then, over the years,
You all went to Australia?
after the independence, his share
Yeah. The same in Zanzibar and other places. Yeah.
was introduced.
Yeah.
So we had to actually leave Mozambique. I was born in Mozambique.
Oh, really? Yeah.
We left. So
Subhanallah.
we had to migrate.
Skin, alhamdulillah.
Sorry? Musa bin Bek.
Is it really?
Yes.
Wow.
Musa bin Bek. That's actual.
Ajib. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Isn't even the Comoros Islands in Arabic, Juzr al-Qamar, the moon islands,
Yeah.
and that's very significant in terms of Islamic symbolism. The moon,
See, there was a tendency of creating lingua franca for the East Coast.
Yes.
West Africa,
Yeah.
Swahili.
Swahili.
The word
Khabari yako. Mzuri. Do you speak Swahili? I don't. That's about. I just try to impress you.
Shwabu is a local language. Mozambique is a vast country.
Yeah, it is. It's huge. Oh,
The
really?
north of Mozambique,
Yeah.
most of people they speak Swahili because they
Aye.
go to Zanzibar to study.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And it's the border.
Habib Umar bin Ahmed bin Sumait. He was the chief qadi of East Africa. He's the teacher of my teachers. Yeah. Habib Umar bin Ahmed bin Sumait. He's buried in the Comoros Islands.
See, unfortunately, with Mozambique, the official language is Portuguese.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
That's not.
So it's unfortunate because we don't have people who can speak the language, and come and dissipate especially the ihsan part of it. There's a lot of things happening in Mozambique, but they limit to Islam and Iman.
Mm-hmm.
The ihsan, they don't talk about.
Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing about that is if you do that, you actually end up not being able to understand Islam or Iman. You know, because they all come hand in hand.
So we're running a school here at the moment.
Okay.
With Islamic ethos.
Yeah,
Everybody is welcome.
yeah,
But we need volunteers to come and help us,
Right.
especially on this part.
yeah. Inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Mama keep using inshallah.
Now, talking about Portuguese language, there's a lot of
I knew that was coming.
words.
It just couldn't be dropped, could it? Any other questions?
which are derived from
Yeah, absolutely,
Arabic, because Portugal and Spain was ruled by Muslims
Yeah, yeah.
700
yeah,
years.
Yeah.
So a lot of words are Arabic derived.
Subhanallah. Yeah. Are we still rolling? No, there's just something. It doesn't matter. Like Bismillah. There's this great people of Allah. He came, and the Portuguese were about to take over Yemen because they came to the Yemeni coast through Aden. There was someone called Imam Abu Bakr al-Adani, al-Aidarus, and he stood on the corner and he saw the Portuguese warships coming. Don't relate this because people are going to think we're like. But this was an aggravating, clear enemy, people that were going to come and pillage. And so he stood and he looked over and he made dua and he had a bowl of maraq, just like broth. And the Arabs, they take bread and he put it on top and he looked at them and they were coming and he goes like this. And he stood on the cliff and he puts the bread down and the ship goes whoosh, puts another piece down and the other ship goes whoosh. All these ships start going, he leaves a few to go back and say like, better not try anything around here. Yeah. لَهُمْ مَا يَشَاءُونَ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. They have whatever Allah wants them to do, and it's difficult to understand in a contemporary modern climate. Idea, but the concept of a miracle is actually very rational. It's the understanding that physics is at the behest of Allah. If Allah decides to change the physics for things for whoever He wills, He does. And the general point of creed is that anything which is permissible for a prophet, it's also permissible for somebody else as well, except for revelation. And there are different forms of miracle as well. It's in the Quran. The overwhelming dominant opinion was that Sayyidah Mary, wasn't a prophet, but she had miracles. And so when Zakaria came in and she found, fruits which were not in season. Now it's normal because we just go to the supermarket and just get it shipped everywhere else. But in those times, it was astonishing, Aina laki min hada? Like, where did you get this from, Maryam? And he turns and he says, Inna Allahi yarzuqu man yasha bighayri hisab. Allah gives to whom He wills with no account. Like, Allah's not accountable. Allah does whatever He wants. And that's an example of a miraculous thing taking place. They say one of the first signs of a community, of a religious, faith-based community, losing its reality is they start to lessen in their belief of the unseen. So it becomes very like outward and dry, and they're holding on to like cultural practices, and it's no longer permeated to something which is transformative. And that's in the first line of the Quran. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those that believe in the unseen. That's the first attribute of the people of taqwa, to believe in that which is unseen. So, because we try and rationalize everything. If the heart's given the opportunity to be cultivated, then it starts to have more of a belief and an appreciation for these things. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Does anyone have any question? Yeah, please. Assalamu alaikum.
Can you just enlighten us in regards to how is spirituality received in England compared to, I'm not too familiar if you've been to Brisbane, Australia before, in general, in comparison, how we can move forward.
Okay.
Advice for us?
I mean, it's a deep question. I think it's received by different people in different ways. I think a lot of the time, certain people, I'd say most people are craving it, but most people also don't really know what it is they're craving. And I think at one level, if you look in terms of certain statistics, in terms of mental health, they say up to a quarter of the population is suffering from some form of, particularly depression. And I would say that was a sign that there is a component within those people which is just craving. Like if you starve yourself, you're craving something, and they don't really know what they're craving, so they'll explore it in different ways, And spirituality is also, can be a loaded term. Often it's kind of like, it's something that people go and do in Bali, and just go and, burn incense sticks and go and, It's not to underestimate, to kind of downplay that. I think people are, it's like when the Beatles went out on that whole trip, just went to India and that was the cool thing to do. But there were many people actually that followed them and became Muslim. It's interesting. It represents something within all of us that we're trying to seek something a bit deeper. So I'd say in England, I think most people are trying to fill that space. They're just probably very much unaware of what it is, what it represents. In America, it's a bit easier in terms of statistics. They say there's a huge percentage of youth, of young people, that are seeking some kind of spiritual tradition, but there's a huge amount that don't want religion, which is interesting. And often, if you look into it, it's not religion. It's the conveyors of religion. It's the people of the religion. Sometimes the greatest conduits to put people right off. That's why it's that office is such a huge responsibility. And that's what put people off in England in terms of Christianity. They just saw an incredible amount of hypocrisy within the proponents of that. And it's not everyone, but there was a significant amount. So. I think for Muslims as well, people are becoming more and more reacquainted with their tradition. But I think that also takes time. Particularly if we've been conditioned and grown up in a worldview which is very different to an authentic Islamic worldview. It's about, your value is placed upon what degree you have, what house you have, and what car you have. That's your position in society. And the idea of having a worth with God, a worth in the sight of Rasulullah is very foreign to many Muslims. But that's what the Sahaba were interested in. Yeah. I think also, the understanding as well of spirituality, once again, of being this kind of very removed, impractical, thing that happened in some village back in the day. It's not really relevant to us. I'd actually argue it's far more relevant to us now than ever before, because we're so out of touch with our souls. We don't even know what it is. And the problem is with that is then you become you open yourself up to be abused. Like I was in Malaysia, and there was a sign I was going past on the road. There was this giant kind of Samsung kind of thing, it's buy me now, regret it eternally. And then the next sign was, it was in Malay, but the brother who was next to me driving, he translated it for me, and he said, like, life is more colourful, like life without boundaries is more, like, is better, more fun. And I thought that resonated with me, because I thought, like, just what a complete lie. Like, who wants like complete anarchy in their lives? Anyone that's experienced that, of course we want. Human beings, we crave discipline, even in terms of children. It doesn't mean being strict or harsh. It just means giving a framework, and that's such a child that isn't given that often feels neglected. So if it's appropriated in a gentle way, children love that. They feel as though it's a sign, that they're being looked after. So I think in our societies also, we have this idea of like, or rather previous societies the world over had this idea of initiation into manhood or womanhood, like coming of age, and like there's this kind of like path of, the Spartans would go out and fight a wolf. The first generation peoples in the States would go out and they would have an initiation process, and they'd come back as a man or as a woman. And now what we get in the UK is like 45-year-old teenagers that don't really know what it means and haven't assumed that responsibility. And that's challenging. We need the framework as human beings. So I think, to answer the question, I would argue that people are craving it more than ever. But it's just they don't, the Muslims all too often are not representing it within themselves and within the, there's either they're too insular or they're just disinterested with that. They're more interested about the Samsung on the billboard. But there's always hope. And there's many people I've seen like convert just because of that. They're just unaware of this vast tradition in Islam. It's so profound. It's really that, when we talk about Islamic civilization, typically like, the people of Allah and the scholars, they're not really interested about like, architecturally it's beautiful, and all of, architecture, medicine, sciences, but they're interested in the root. What fueled that? Like, what was the source for that? And it was this great like spiritual nourishment and intellectual nourishment which allowed people to, to create these great buildings and great discoveries in whatever it was. Alhamdulillah. What happened to the break? Okay. Alhamdulillah. Should we carry on? If you guys want to take a quick 5 minutes? You're not going to tell me, are you? Okay. Speak now, forever hold your peace. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Stretch your legs. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So I'm just going to read a few pages, if you don't mind, from the actual text, rather the translation from the text. So yeah. If people want to read along, or if people just want to like close their eyes and just like internalize the meaning, I don't want to do it just as a formality. We should really understand. Imam al-Haddad himself, he said that every word is cloaked with the state of the heart for which it pours forth from. So basically, when people are illuminated, when they speak, their words are similarly illuminated, and that has an impact upon the soul. So we read this. Typically we recite. Do you have the Arabic? No? It would have been nice to read this, because they have a tradition of reading in Hadramaut. It's almost like it's chanted. It's really beautiful. Inshallah next time. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. In the name of God, the All-Merciful, the Compassionate. All ability and strength are only by Allah, only by God, the High, the Formidable. Praise belongs to God, when He wills, when He wills, casts into the heart of seekers the anguish of longing, thereby driving them to travel the path to happiness, which is faith, worship, and the extinction of all formalism and habits. May God send His blessings and peace upon our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Master of Masters, and upon his family and companions who themselves are masters and leaders. God the Exalted has said, and who is more truthful than He, whoever desires the immediate, we shall hasten what we will of it to whomever we will. Then we shall appoint for him hell, in which he will be plunged, blamed and defeated. And whoever desires the hereafter and earnestly strives for it, and he is a believer, these shall have their strivings rewarded. The immediate, as mentioned here, is the fleeting world, the ephemeral world, in Arabic dunya. Therefore, the one who merely desires this world, they only want this world, let alone actively pursues it, ends up in the fire, blamed and belittled. Should not a man of reason beware and turn away from it? The reason being for this is just a complete polarization of the purpose for our creation. If we were created to be people of devotion and we're misappropriating that devotion in its absolute entirety towards that which is away from God, then this is problematic. The hereafter here means the garden, Jannah or heaven. It's not enough to merely desire it in order to gain it. Faith and good works are both necessary, and as is indicated in the passage, and earnestly strives for it, and he or she, by implication, is a believer. The strivings to be rewarded are those deeds that are accepted by God, thereby deserving praise and such great rewards without limits nor endings, all by the grace of God and His mercy. The complete loser is the seeker of this world, whose end was described in the Quran. His desire for the world is so powerful that it causes him to forget and even deny the hereafter. He is a disbeliever and he will be in hell forever. The one who acknowledges the hereafter but does not strive for it is astray, and yet another loser. There's a form of loss in this archetype. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, deeds depend on intentions. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَىٰ. Deeds that are based, or the soundness, the validity of actions are based upon their intentions. Each man, or each person, actually person is the Arabic, وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَىٰ. Every person receives according to what they have intended. He whose migration was for the sake of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Alhamdulillah. He whose migration is for worldly things, he wishes to acquire, or for a woman he wishes to marry, then he has migrated for that which he has intended. The Prophet ﷺ thus informed us that one's deed is only as valid as the intention behind it. So everything that we do, its validity with Allah is only in direct correlation towards the agenda that we have in doing that particular deed or uttering that particular word, so on and so forth. And that people are rewarded according to their intentions. When these intentions are good, they receive nothing but good. When these are evil, they receive nothing but evil. He whose intention is good, his deed is then inevitably good. And he whose intention is malicious, his deed is inevitably malicious. Even if it appears good outwardly, as in the case of a man who behaves in a righteous way, only to appear righteous in the eyes of people. The Prophet ﷺ also informed us that he who acts for the sake of God by following in the footsteps of the Messenger of God ﷺ, his reward is with God, who will be pleased with him and make his last abode his garden, Jannah. Near him, or in his company, is closeness, intimacy with the Divine Jalla Jalalu, and in the company of the best of His people. Those whose intentions are directed toward other than God and who act as such, their rewards are with those whom their intentions are directed. Those they performed for, those who can neither benefit nor harm them or anyone else. Those who can cause neither life, death, nor the resurrection. The Prophet ﷺ elected to speak of migration, hijrah, by way of providing an example. It is well known to the people of understanding, rules such as these can be generalized to all the laws of Islam. what we're talking about here, they can be appropriated to any walk aspect or any expression in our lives. And it's an archetype. Anything that you do, any action that you perform, it's related to the intention behind it. I now say this: know, O disciple, O murid, O seeker, who is intent on directing himself or herself toward God, that when you requested me to send you something of our teachings, I found nothing ready that could suit your purpose. So Imam al-Haddad was asked to write this treatise by one of his students. Therefore, I decided to record brief chapters containing some of the good manners of discipleship, some of the adab, some of the sacred courtesies of the one who is desirous of the akhirah, who is seeking Allah, in an accessible manner of expression. Jazallahu khair. It is God whom I ask to benefit me, you and all other brothers and sisters, with what He will inspire in me of this matter and allow me to reach. He is my sufficiency and the best of guardians. Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakeel. I'm going to start now and just read chapter 1. The beginning of the path is a powerful urge of divine origin which should be strengthened, protected and responded to. Know that the path begins when a powerful urge is cast into the heart of the servant, which troubles and unnerves him and drives him towards God and the last abode. It turns him away from this world and from being, like others, engaged in amassing and grooming it, tasting and enjoying its pleasures, and being deceived by its ornaments. This urge is one of the hidden warriors of God. It is a gift of solicitude and a sign of right guidance. It is often bestowed upon a servant as he listens to those people who stir in him the fear of Allah, as well as a desire and yearning for Him. And when he looks at the men of God, or the women of God, and they look at him, it can be given without a cause. It is commanded and encouraged to actively subject oneself to receive some gift, to expose oneself to these gifts. For one to expect to receive something when not standing at the door and subjecting oneself therein is foolish and unintelligent. The Messenger of God ﷺ said, "Your Lord has gifts in these days of your time. Subject yourself to receive them." He whom God honors with such a noble urge must know how precious it is. Let him also know that it is one of the greatest favors of God, exalted is He, such that he will never fully know how truly precious it is, nor he will ever be able to show gratitude enough for it. So let him thank God, exalted is He, to his utmost for having selected him from amongst his peers to receive it. How many a Muslim reaches the age of 80 or more and neither finds this yearning nor is affected by it a single day of his life? A disciple, a murid, should do his best to strengthen, protect and respond to this urge. Strengthen, protect and respond to this urge. Strengthening it is by remembering God often, engaging in dhikr of Allah, reflecting on it, on what He has, meaning reflecting upon Jannah, reflecting upon what Allah gives to those people that seek a path unto Him, and keeping the company of the people of God, basically good company. We can discuss this. Protecting what this urge, this reality which has been placed in the heart. Protecting it is by keeping away from the company of those who are veiled, and by ignoring the insinuations of devils, the waswasat al-shaytan. Responding to it, third thing, is by hastening to return to God, to turn back to Allah, to increase in one's devotion, and sincerely seeking His nearness by neither waiting, postponing, procrastinating, nor delaying. This is a chance that one is given and should seize. The door is now open for him, and he should enter. He is being called, and he should be swift. Let him be aware of letting one day pass after the other, for this is the work of the shaitan. He must advance and not weaken. He must refuse manufacturing excuses, such as saying that there is no time, that it's not good enough for the task. I'm no good for this is for someone else. Abu Rabi', may Allah have mercy upon him, said, go to God with your limps and your broken limbs. Siru ilallah urjan wa makasir. Do not wait for full health, for that would only be idleness, meaning it may never come around. Imam Ibn Abta'illah Iskandari said in his Hikam, book on his aphorisms, to say that the work must be postponed until one is free, until one is free, is but the idleness of the soul. Wallahu a'lam. Bismillah. What time were we supposed to finish? 4:30? 15 minutes. Allah make it easy. Inshallah. So, Imam al-Haddad begins the text by rooting it in revelation. This isn't something which is dreamt up. It was something which is rooted, and it's an inheritance of a spiritual legacy, a spiritual tradition from the Prophet ﷺ himself. And he talks about the immediate, al-ajla, this immediacy, which means the dunya. Now, dunya is an interesting concept. Dunya linguistically means something which is lowly, not refined, it's not celestial, it's something which has a physicality to it, and it's something which is not it's not worthy of, it's not of inherent value. It also has the connotation linguistically of being, it's kind of magnetic, it pulls you. The dunya is enticing, it pulls you, draws you in. Now, Imam al-Haddad is saying here, it's not good to seek the dunya. Now, people say, well, I need to earn a living. Well, we need to now have some definitions of what dunya means. Dunya is the component of the ephemeral world, which acts as a distraction to God. So somebody could be working and earning a living, and it's only increasing them in their connection to God. And somebody could be sat at home not working, and it's actually a distraction from God. Somebody could be seeking sacred knowledge, and it's a distraction from God, because they're doing it for ulterior motives, to be seen in the sight of people. So, one of the definitions from our teacher, Habib Umar ibn Hafidh, is the dunya is anything which distracts you from God. And there's this reality that if you're actively seeking to be distracted from God, this is something which Allah isn't impressed with. Because Allah is also, He has this ghayra, this kind of jealousy. Because Allah is worthy, and that's La ilaha illallah. There's no one worthy of devotion except Allah. And it's like you're sacrificing what? For what? No. And then Imam al-Haddad says that what you to do is to seek the akhirah. Now the akhirah is representative of something unseen, somewhat transcendent, celestial. So you're getting in contact now to this light component within you, your clay and your light. If all you do is remain in the clay, you're actually abusing yourself, and only وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسِهِمْ يَظْلِمُونَ. Rather, we didn't wrong them. They wrong their own selves by reducing their potentiality as a human being just to the realms of clay, just to the dunya. We need to be people of light, and how do we do that? By having high objectives, high goals. This was the path, and this was the way of the Prophet ﷺ. How do we do this? Through intention. And this is one of the real practical coordinates, and it's the first coordinate. To actively do something, to do something with purpose. Why am I sat here right now today? Why am I getting up in the morning? Why am I going to work? Why am I, being kind to my parents? Well, it sounds like a nice thing to do, but where's the intentionality? Where's the purpose? What's the real reason? And sometimes we might say, well, it's obvious. Of course I'm doing nice to my parents because it's a good thing to do. But that conditioning, almost articulation of that intention draws something out. And it also refines a person's approach. Because you can be around people, but it's not quality time. But if you're around somebody and you have an agenda, and which I mean is another worldly agenda, it's a positive agenda, that transforms your experience and also other people's experiences of you. So Imam al-Haddad, he says the first thing to do is to really refine this intention. One of the examples for being here today is to seek. You come here seeking Allah. You come here seeking sacred knowledge. You come here, come to a gathering of sacred knowledge to learn more about your religion, to learn more about your Prophet ﷺ, to learn more about yourself, to expose the heart to a sakina and a tranquility which descends in such gatherings, which can't be received anywhere else. And so the heart can go into a state of tranquility and movement, ease that movement into the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All these are examples of intentions. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ إِمْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. Actions are the validity, the soundness of one's actions, what you do, what you say, the way you act, your behavior, your saluk, is only to do with your intention. What's the agenda behind it? Because actions, the two people could be praying, and it's the exact same thing outwardly, but their inward state may be the difference of night and day. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, pay attention to this, because this is what it's all about. In Allah, la yanzur ila surikum. Allah does not look at your outward form. Does it mean Allah can't see it? Of course not. There's nothing which inhibits Rabbil Alameen. But the prevalence, what is Allah interested in? What does Allah place value and worth in? It's not just how you express yourself. It's where is that rooted? Is it rooted in something deep? وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. Rather, He looks to your hearts and your deeds. And the articulation, the language of the heart is the intention. So become acquainted with doing this. And you can become really creative. Because there are certain things which are mubah. Neither here nor there, you don't get rewarded for doing. There's no sin involved were you to neglect it. So a lot of our lives is eating, for example. You don't get a reward inherently for eating. The sin would only come about is if you were to starve yourself. But let's face it, most of us are not going to be in that state, to actively do that. So how do we gain a reward for eating? Imam al-Haddad in another text, he talks about this. To sit and just be present with the food. To recognize this, they say about just to look, for example, you have some bread. How many different processes did this have to go to in order for it to be before you on that plate? And we take it for granted. But you have, there's the initial, the growth of the seed, for example. That only took place because Allah willed it to happen. And then the harvesting, and then the processing, and then the rendering it into flour, and then the kneading, and then the baking, and then, whether you made it yourself or whether you bought it from the supermarket. There are all these vast processes which take place, which you didn't have to worry about, but it's there before me now. So much of the intention is rooting oneself in presence. They talk a lot now about mindfulness, being in the present moment, and that's very much a part of our tradition. But it doesn't end there with our tradition. It's not just about being present in the present moment for the sake of being in the present moment. No, it's because if you can only know somebody if you spend time with them. And if you don't spend time with Allah, how can you know Him? And if you don't know Him, how can you love Him? How can you fear Him? How can you be in awe of Allah if you never spend any time with Him? So what Imam al-Haddad is saying, the way to voice it out to Allah, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm aware, I'm conscious. Now, even if something seemingly mundane as my food, but just that means something to Allah, because you didn't have to do that. So you make the intention. Imam al-Haddad, he gives an example. You make the intention to increase in eating this, to increase in devotion, because you can only pray if you have If you starve yourself, you're not going to be useful for anything. To serve the community, to be a source of help or aid to people in assistance, whatever it may be. You just make the intention. And what that is it's activating the soul. It's saying, wake up, now's the time to wake up. And this, leads to a response from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah's hand in our lives. And that's what this means is, the hadith Qudsi is the one that comes to me a handspan's length. I come to him an arm's length, dhira'. This is figurative, it's not physical. But what it means is if you engage with integrity to Allah, to the Creator, then don't think it's not going to be reciprocated. And it's going to be reciprocated in a way which is, appropriate to the one that's reciprocating. And if it's Allah, then, we have no means of even understanding, comprehending the beauty of which it could be reciprocated with. So just taking that time, those few moments just before a meal, that's an example of that. That's the intention. So this is the introduction, and he says, why are we doing this? And then Imam al-Haddad talks about something of the realities of this path. That there is an initiation, but it's not a cultish initiation. It's an initiation from the Creator. It's Allah who's doing the initiating. And the way this is done is He places something in the soul, in the heart. And what's fascinating, he says, in the Arabic, يُزْعِجُهُ وَيَقْلِقُهُ. Basically it makes the person agitated. You can think, well, that doesn't sound very spiritual. I want to be peaceful and tranquil and but the first thing that happens is you start to become like unnerved and oh my God, this is real. Like it's sobering. We have that within our tradition. Some certain things you hear and it's like, wow, that's pretty sobering. I'm going to die and there is an accountability and there is and that's not to frighten people. When we talk about fear of Allah, it's not to kind of cripple you or suffocate you. It's actually to reinvigorate and to re-inspire. So you start going into motion again. If you need stagnancy, you need to start to, it needs to be brought back into motion. If you have stagnant water, it starts to fester and become putrid. Our Islam needs to be flowing throughout us. Tamam. And then he talks about this reality. In Arabic, it's called the ba'ith. Ba'ith, from the verb ba'atha yab'athu. Ba'ith literally means it's like this, as I said, this instigating factor, this catalyst, this kind of spiritual impetus, which it describes it's like almost like it's one of the hidden warriors of God. It's something that Allah just places in the soul. And often like people, they're not seeking guidance, but it's like, oh, what's this about? And it's this lifting of the veil of consciousness. It can be very profound. And then he says one of the ways to expose oneself to this, meaning if we haven't yet felt this, it's something important we need to try and engage with. And it can often happen when a person listens to somebody who speaks of truth. And it says fear of God, what we mean with people of authenticity. They're speaking truth, they're not being apologetic, they're just speaking from a place of absolute sincerity. That can be a catalyst to, create this feeling within the heart. And I love this, like towards the end he said, it's to look upon the people of Allah or for them to look upon you. And that's one of the greatest catalysts. Like if a person, because they have a principle in psychology that sick people, hurt people hurt people. Like if you're hurt, it's very hard not to hurt others because there's this toxicity, unfortunately, within the soul, which is very hard to kind of prevent other people from experiencing. But the same is true with health. Healthy people make other people healthy. And there's, this idea of affiliation and association in our deen is so important. You looked at about like the Sahaba. Who were the Sahaba? They were the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. But why are they known as the Sahaba, the companions? Because their companionship was their greatest quality. That was the greatest thing that they had. The fact that they took the companionship of the Prophet ﷺ, that was the greatest thing that they had. Not the fact that they were, had these great devotional acts. That was the, thing which made them into who they were, just to be in His illuminated presence. So to seek those people out. And often they don't wear a name badge or brand it on the t-shirt, but the people of Allah, they have certain qualities. Humility. They have a brokenness in their eyes typically. If you look into their eyes, they're always smiling, but they have an inner brokenness. Allah said to Prophet Musa, alayhi salam, or rather he was seeking. And look at the questions of the awliya, of the anbiya, the prophets. This is if someone loves someone. The prophets were the greatest lovers of Allah, and we forget this. But the prophets were lovers. They knew what love meant, and they came to teach people what love meant. And he said, "Aina ajiduka ya Rab? Where will I find you?" Who asks that question now? Because a lot of the question of the Muslims, and it's good, but it's like, how do I do this? It's technicalities. And that's why we're very unaccommodating of other people when we see them breaking. We try and catch people out on a technicality. Or they don't wear the hijab properly, or they don't do this properly, or they don't get the right style, shape, colour of beard. And it's just all these kind of like very, and these things get misproportioned and, misprioritized. But where's the spirit of how do I find God? Because this is what the deen's about, and if it's not doing that for us, what are we doing? Not only are we stagnant, I think we're actually regressing and going back. And Allah warns us in the Quran about this. You have the archetype of Bani Israel, the people that actually started to worship the path, worship the coordinates, worship the law. And if you start to worship the law because the law isn't God, it's a very subtle nuance. Not that we disrespect the law, but we understand the law, the Sharia, is, even linguistically, it means a path. But once again, it's a path unto something. You're seeking Allah. And if we don't do this and we make these false idols of the law, then what starts to happen? The human being knows that the law isn't a God, so you can make, you can start to go around and find loopholes. If your sight is on Allah and catching the eye of Rabbil Alameen, how do you impress Him, Jalla Jalaluh? Then it's very hard to because you know that He's always watching and always listening, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Sayyidina Musa, he said, how do I find you? And this is a prophet of God. How do I find you? How do I experience your intimacy? How do I feel your touch? How do I experience you in my life? It's the pinnacle of saluk. That's the end of the path. That's what those are the questions of the people that knew Allah. How can I be with you more? And Allah responded, Allah revealed, "Satajiduni inda al-munkasirati al-qulub min ajli." You'll find me with those people whose hearts are broken for my sake. You'll find me with those people whose hearts are broken for my sake. And what does it mean to have a heart which is broken for God? A person they're in this world, but they're not quite of it. Those people that their hearts have become so refined, so cultivated, that they're constantly yearning. That was Rasulullah. When he was on his deathbed, they came to Aisha and they said, what did he say? And he said he's been given a choice. She said, what was the choice? He said it was the choice to stay in this world amongst us, or Ar-Rafiq al-A'la, to go to the highest company, back to Allah. She wept. She said, "Idan la yakhtarana abadan." He said, and He's never going to choose us. She knew him, When after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, she said people came to her and they wanted to learn about him, and they said, what was he best at? What did he do best? And she said, everything. He did everything the best. There was nothing he didn't do beautifully. And for somebody, for one's spouse to say that about somebody is deep. Because, at home you can't hide anything. And but if there's one thing, that in the depths of the night, when everybody went back to the ones that they loved, he went back to his. Meaning he would spend the night in prayer, in intimacy with Allah, and just what was that? SubhanAllah. And there's that brokenness, because you can't experience intimacy if you've not experienced pain. And that's part of the wisdom of pain. Because if you've never been broken, how can you taste what it means to be mended and healed? That's why often, the idea of just having that, that to be comforted by Allah is such a profound spiritual state, And the people of Allah experience this because Allah tests them. They go through very immense tests. The Prophet buried all of his children. We can't forget this. They all died. Went through immense tests. And the people of Allah have this otherworldliness about them. That's why they call to Allah, because they're not really with the people. Yeah. One of the people of Allah, he said, for 20 years people thought I was speaking to them, that I was just in conversation with the Creator. Yeah. What does that mean? That means there's a person whose consciousness is so refined that they experience the realities of La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no power, there is no movement, there is no change, there is nothing except through Allah. So they're so rooted, this is a bit deep, but it's awesome. Like, they're so rooted in that connection to the celestial, even the linear becomes kind of like, when they speak to somebody, they're seeking the reward of Allah. And that's why they're the best people to be around, because there's no ego with these people. If you're constantly engaged in the lower, like in the dunya, you want your own rights, you want your own this, and that's why the people of Allah can forgive, because they don't harbour things. They say one of the greatest ways to get rid of the diseases of the heart is to fall in love. Because there are certain things which we can only forgive through love. Like if you can't love, it's very difficult to rationalize certain things. So to be around the people of Allah. And this was the Sahaba. A definition of a Sahabi is somebody who lived in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, looked at the Prophet ﷺ and believed in his message and died upon Iman. That's all. Not that they were scholars, not that they were, but just the power of that glance. And then they say, he looked upon them. Because there were Sahaba that were blind, but the fact that the prophetic gaze landed upon them had an impact. In the time of the Sahaba, they would, when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, if there was a drought in Medina, they would call upon the Prophet's uncle. And then, or they would, and in other instances, they would say, in the time of the Tabi'een, is there anyone amongst us that's seen the Messenger of Allah? And then they would ask Allah through the barakah of the presence of this person amongst them, and that illumination which they were carrying through the Prophet ﷺ looking at them, and then the eye is very, very profound. We believe in the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Al-Ainu haq. The eye is a reality. I don't like the translation evil eye, it sounds far too fairy tale kind of, but the idea of that a person's spiritual state can have an impact on another human being's spiritual state is absolutely real. And often we talk about this in a negative sense, but the same is true. Habib Ahmed Mashhur al-Haddad, he would say, just as this is true for the evil eye, if an eye is pure and healthy, it can also be transformative. And that's why sometimes spending time in the company of the people of Allah, you go away feeling slightly like, what just happened? And to taste that and experience that is one of the great gifts of Allah. La ilaha illallah. And then when the Sahaba passed away, they would say, is there anyone amongst you that's seen the one who's seen the Messenger of Allah? And they have this sanad, like, anyone amongst you that's seen the one who's seen the one who's seen the Messenger of Allah? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah. So inshallah, if we're going to take one thing away, inshallah we understand something, that this path is real, it's authentic, it has implications to every single one of us. We're all on a path, it's just that whether we now become actively engaged with it and we start to understand the coordinates in which we're traversing. We want to know where our destination is, and we want to know the way into it. And we're all at our own pace. Nobody's judging anyone. But we look to ourselves and we actively engage in this. And this is the sunnah, and this is the way, and this is the teachings of our beloved Prophet ﷺ. And the first thing is an intention. وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ. We guide them to two paths. You have a choice which way you want to go. And the intention is to govern which way you want to, what's the form of your motion, which way do you want to be heading. And then also to know that if anybody's experienced this or wants to experience this reality, then they expose themselves to it by being in gatherings of sacred knowledge and Senate. Alhamdulillah, it's nothing from me, I'm nothing, but we have just the honor of, this is now a gathering of Senate, because I've studied with this book, taken this book from people who have taken it all the way back in an unbroken chain back to Imam al-Haddad, and he took his knowledge and his teachers all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. So any transformation, if it's real, comes through the light of that chain. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Hopefully it wasn't too intense and intensive. Hopefully it wasn't too light as well. We needed it. Allah bless you all. Thank you. Sorry for taking too much of your time. Inshallah, it's of benefit. Does anyone have any closing questions? Typically my experience with these books is it's like you've taken on a meal and it takes some time just to digest. And sometimes you have questions, you have thoughts, and it may be like in a day or 2 or 3. But these books are so potent, because it's not just about what we hear. There are things, unseen things working. That's why engaging in this is one of the great gifts of Allah, just to allow us to engage in these books. They're living books. It's a living tradition. Alhamdulillah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you all, and anybody that came here with a need, that Allah fulfills their need and makes it easy for them. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anyone that came here and experiencing some kind of difficulty or challenge or problems within their lives, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lifts that from their lives, or allows them to find a way through it, inshallah, and they come out refreshed and positive and mended on the other side, inshallah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us all, everyone's family, loved ones, friends, fills our hearts with light, makes us people of the prophetic way, makes us people of kindness and generosity and compassion, and allows us to love. It's a very taboo word in this current day and age. We can't, but love is a reality. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي. Say, if you truly love Allah, if you truly love Allah, Allah says, if you truly love Allah, then follow me, follow Rasulullah. يُحْبِبُكُمْ Allah, and Allah will love you. So this is a reality. May Allah bless everyone. If people have studies, or may Allah bless their studies, any exams or tests or whatever. May Allah make these connections to the Senate and through the Senate and by this Senate a means for reviving our hearts and reviving our homes and replenishing, restoring, revitalizing our spirits, our minds, inshallah, in every way, inwardly and outwardly, and by implication our communities and societies, and become conduits for khair, for goodness. Kuntum khayra ummah ukhrijat linnas. You are the greatest of nations, of ummah. Ukhrijat linnas. You are sent forth to the people, not to be arrogant or to look down or to condemn, but to guide them to that which is good. Ta'muruna bil khayr. You summon to that which is beautiful, that which is good. May Allah make us all great conduits of this, inshallah. And may Allah gather us all together, inshallah, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, under the banner of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he looks upon us and he's smiling, and we take from the water in his hawd, in his great basin on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill our lives with light, fill our graves with light when we reach them, fill our akhirah with light, and Yawm al-Qiyamah, we're people of light. Inshallah, we will enter into Jannah. And Jannah, in paradise, and Yawm al-Qiyamah, when people go to paradise, they have conversations, and they talk about the time when they were in the world. Can you remember that time when we met up in Brisbane, and we were talking about Imam al-Haddad, and we were talking about this, we were talking about the official language of Mozambique, and we were talking about, we had a glass of water, and then we did this, and then what we did. You have these conversations, but they say the only regret of the people of paradise is that they wish they could have remembered Allah more whilst in the world. That's the only, because they see the implications of what it meant, like to be a person of dhikr. And this is the only reason why we have these gatherings, to remember Allah and bring glory to the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu Akbar. And this is all dhikr. And the purpose of dhikr is to be with the madhkur. The purpose of dhikr, remembrance, is to be with the one you're remembering. So may Allah help us to be present with Him in everything that we do. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair.
Sorry? Question? Yeah.
Question? Sure. Bismillah.
I just want to comment about asking about how we actually deal with the part that's in the first sentence, which is about it unhurting.
Okay, yeah.
And I think this is just the beauty of the Islam, they're very emotional.
It's fine. It is emotional. Of course it is, because it's due to the heart. And if we don't feel it, then we're dead. If we don't feel that, we're dead. So it's actually a positive thing. Of course it's emotional. It's epic. It's very intense. Alhamdulillah. Take your time. It's fine. We're listening. Alhamdulillah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah.
It's just something that my husband and I really struggled with actually for the last year.
Yeah. La ilaha illallah.
We spent a year in Fez
Okay.
last year,
Fantastic. Okay.
and we got exposed to this wonderful lifestyle,
Yeah.
very rich in history and where dhikr just
Yeah, sure.
flowed off people's tongues.
Yeah.
Even young children sense of the rights to the Prophet, and
Yeah.
our children came back seeing qasidas during
Yeah, right, yeah.
playtime. And this is very
Mashallah,
natural,
yeah.
very
Yeah,
natural,
it is. It's fitra.
because every time you walk through the street, you could hear the kids from
Mm.
the neighborhood.
Allahu Akbar.
Sit on your rooftop, there's a mawlid going on.
Mashallah.
It's a very in tune
Yes.
society.
Yeah.
And I guess we've come back now and come back to a society like this,
Mm-hmm.
where it kind of feels a bit dead.
Yeah.
And it's trying to get back and trying to find that purpose that came so natural. Because you were just surrounded around these wonderful people. And their end goal is actually knowledge. It's finding Allah. It's being with these amazing great scholars. And
Sure.
wanting to be part of that that realm.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people are actually in Fez just to gain the language and
Yeah.
end up in places like Qadim.
Right, yeah.
And so we've come back trying to reinvigorate some of this here, but it's such a struggle.
Subhanallah.
We've just realised that we don't need to work extra because the risk is already set. So what we have is actually more than enough. So that kind of purpose is it's not even there, it doesn't even exist anymore.
Yes.
We've got plenty of what we need to survive.
Yeah.
So there's been a struggle in terms of what is our purpose? And I know the purpose in terms of written purpose, I know what it means. It's to
Of course,
Allah,
sure,
to know
of course,
Allah, but
of course.
applying that every day in a very practical sense can be very struggling.
It's very true.
Sometimes I feel like we just float and
Yeah.
and we do what you mentioned, which is really actually very good about, teaching our kids gratitude. So we've got the loaf of bread, and we always
Right,
talk
mashallah.
about how many people did it get to this.
Yeah.
Let's be thankful to the farmer, to Allah, to
Yeah, right.
to all that, and that's great. But how do you actually get rid of this unnerving feeling where you just feel like you're not quite part of this
Yeah.
where you are right
Yeah.
now? You want to be somewhere else, which
Yeah.
so circumstances can't make that possible.
Mm-hmm.
How do you actually live harmoniously
Mm-hmm.
with this
SubhanAllah.
sort of unnerving? How do you find purpose in
Yeah.
the nerves?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely the concept of like being like a fish out of water.
Yeah.
You know, and if you've had something of exposure to that ocean,
Oh,
then it's very, very hard to,
incredible. Yeah.
yeah, to get used to breathing again on dry land. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. I experienced that when I was about 21, when I first came back from Tarim for the first time. And it was depressing. I mean, I don't know any other way of putting it. It was like being taken, it was literally like being taken from Jannah and put in hell. I mean, it sounds like it was a bit of it was really like that, because I was, you know, in the middle of, you know, those kind of gatherings, and then being a very kind of like cynical course academic environment of the University of Manchester, and I just wasn't there. Like, my heart was not there. Imam al-Haddadi said, "Al-mar'u haytha qalbuh." Like a person is where his heart is. You know, so there's that idea of, you know, sometimes Allah will distance a person from those things in order to actualize and cultivate certain things within the soul. So, for example, the idea of shawq, yearning, to yearn for something. You only yearn for something when it's been taken away from you. But that's a very high and elated spiritual reality. And you only know a blessing once it's gone. Now, in terms of purpose, you know, once again, Imam al-Haddad, he'll talk in terms of maxims and principles, because this is what's applicable for all times and all places. We can be in 2018 in Brisbane and it can still be relevant, but there's definitely that kind of practical component. And I'd say that's when it starts to get very, very nuanced and, you know, particular to each one of our lives. And we all have subtleties and nuances within our lives, which affects the application of these principles, you know. And everyone has their own unique path and purpose in that regard. So what I would say is, you know, first and foremost, a recognition that's actually a very special feeling, and that's from Allah. And if, you know, the presence of that feeling is also Allah bringing you through to something more refined. The idea of, you know, being in presence, you know, even if you're not physically present. And sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala summons people to that state in order for them to create something in their own environment. So the idea of, like, you know, I mean, when the Habaib, when they went to Indonesia, like, they missed their home, it was just dhikr, and just, so they created it. Khalas. They just made it there, and, you know, to start off small, like, it doesn't have to be like grand kind of things, but if you have a gathering of dhikr and remembrance, teaching that which one knows, you know, just spending time in good company, people that remind you of your purpose. I wish I had a definitive answer. The one thing that I would say that's always, I felt, is very, very good advice, is to connect yourself to authentic inheritors of the tradition. Because of the profundity of their insight, they're able to help with those nuances. Sometimes it can just be a simple word and all of a sudden everything becomes clear. And that's because they're not speaking of their own accord, they're speaking, and Allah just thrusts a light into people's hearts through the barakah of their words. On a practical level, you know, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah doesn't burden a soul beyond its capacity. Allah knows you more than you know, and Allah knows what you're going through. Rasulullah knows what you're going through. Yeah. We have an issue with that. Let's read it right in the middle of the Quran. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ. There's a prophet who has come from amongst you. عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ. It's immense, it's heavy for him, that which is befallen you. Any struggles, any challenges, there's a reality in which the Prophet says, he's informed of these things. حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. He guards over you, watches over you. بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ الرَّؤُوفُ الرَّحِيمُ. And he is compassionate and gentle with the believers. You know. We have to understand also, really, it's not about this life. Jannah is in the akhirah, it's not here. And here we experience that pain, and typically the people that Allah chooses to be close to Him, they've, as we said, they experience pain like no one else. But it's to carve out things in the soul to receive certain other things which can't be experienced except through that. It's related back to Rumi. The wound is the place where light enters. It's the idea of going through a test in order to open something within you. On a practical level, inshallah. It's so hard to give an answer because things are so subjective and things are. Allah make it easy. We need to pray for each other. The Muslim, we need to pray for each other and help each other and serve each other and support each other. And, may Allah take us by the hand, inshallah. Haneen, alhamdulillah, you tasted that. Alhamdulillah, what a great gift. Imam al-Junayd, he said, just mere belief in this affair of ours is a form of sainthood. Wilayat al-Sughra. It's a lesser sainthood. And that's just belief. What about somebody that yearns for it and loves it and wants it? La ilaha illallah. Alhamdulillah. The Sahaba, when they were around the Prophet, they thought that because of the feeling of elation, and it wasn't just a feeling, it's just the clumsiness of our tongue. My English language is so poor now of articulating spiritual realities, but that reality which they were in His presence, this light, so much so that when they went back to home, just down the road, they felt that they'd become hypocrites. And they came, complaining to the Prophet ﷺ. They met Abu Bakr as-Siddiq along the way. He said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to see the Prophet ﷺ. He said, why? He said, I feel like I'm a hypocrite. He said, I feel the same thing, let's go together. And they went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, when we're with you, it's as if khalas, there could be nothing, And you feel this with the inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ, with true scholars which were illumined through Senate. There's just this beauty in being in their presence, and it's addictive, and it's painful when you move away from that. But the Prophet ﷺ, he said, sa'a fa sa'a. It's a give and take. Were you to remain in the state you were upon, when you're in my presence, the malaika, the angelic realm, would have shaken your hands, and greeted you in the streets. You wouldn't have been able to take it. There would be too much clarity of the soul. So Allah knows what He's doing. I mean, He's the one that's really training. He's because you have this idea of qabth and bast. When you knee to the dough, sometimes it's that hurt. But there's a plan here. Allah's constructing you into something which we don't know. Tawfiq, Ya Rabbi. Allah make it easy. And does anyone have any other questions? Or anything they'd like to ask? I don't know are we okay for time? Ya Allah, half an hour over. Please forgive me. Astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah. It's out of respect for people's time. If everyone would like to go. Maybe if we have a 15-20 minute, I could just sit here. People have anything personal they wanted to ask in private. 15-20 minutes or whatever. If you guys wanted to do that, inshallah. Tawfiq. MashaAllah. Thank you to all. Barakallahu feek. Jazakumullah khair.